My name is Laura Caudle, and I was 32 years old on the morning I learned exactly how easy it was for my family to erase me. It happened less than 2 hours before I was supposed to walk down the aisle. I was standing in front of the hotel mirror, makeup only half finished, my phone resting on the counter beside a curling iron that had already cooled. The room smelled faintly of hairspray and citrus cleaner. Everything was perfectly arranged, my dress hanging by the window, the schedule taped to the wall, the soft knock of bridesmaids drifting in and out of the hallway. When my phone buzzed, I didn't rush to check it. I assumed it was another logistics message, a reminder about seating, a question about timing. Maybe my dad telling me to breathe. Instead, it was him. Dad. 3 words sat beneath his name. We won't be there. No punctuation, no explanation, no apology. For a second, my brain refused to process it. I reread the message, then tapped it open, waiting for the rest of the sentence to load, as if something had been cut off. Nothing followed. The phone felt heavier in my hand, like gravity had shifted just for me. Across the room, my maid of honor, Lena, was laughing while adjusting her dress. She joked that I looked too serious, that I had the expression of someone about to sit for a passport photo. I smiled at her automatically, nodded like I'd heard every word. I hadn't. My mind was already racing, scrambling for explanations. Maybe their flight was delayed. Maybe there was a medical emergency. Maybe my dad's phone had been hacked. I clung to each possibility for half a heartbeat before discarding it, because deep down, I knew the truth before I ever admitted it. This wasn't out of character for them. Still, I didn't reply right away. I think part of me was waiting, hoping, for another message to appear. Something softer, something human. And then I made the mistake of opening Instagram. The very first post on my feed froze me in place. It was from my Uncle Rob, a yacht, gleaming white, floating just off the coast of Santorini. The water was an impossible blue, the kind you usually see in travel ads that don't look real until you're there. And standing on the deck, smiling like this was the best day of their lives, was my entire family. My father at the bow, champagne glass raised, sunglasses reflecting the sun. My mother beside him, laughing under a wide-brimmed hat, my sisters in matching sundresses, hair blowing in the wind like a coordinated photo shoot, cousins crowding the deck, bottles held high, every single one of them, and the caption, finally free of the drama. I felt my jaw clench so hard it ached. There was no emergency, no canceled flight, no reason they couldn't be here. They hadn't missed my wedding. They had chosen not to come. Outside the suite, I could hear the hum of guests arriving. Laughter drifted up from the lobby. Somewhere down the hall, a photographer was calling out names, organizing relatives from my fiancé's side for pre-ceremony photos. Lena knocked lightly on the door and asked if I was ready. I didn't answer, because in that moment, staring at a public celebration of my absence, something inside me cracked, and then went very still. This wasn't just about them skipping my wedding. That caption wasn't casual. Finally free of the drama was the kind of thing you post when you want everyone to know exactly who you're talking about without saying their name. They had turned my wedding day into a declaration that their lives were better without me. And the worst part? This wasn't new. Growing up, I learned early where I stood. Birthdays were forgotten. Achievements were acknowledged, with short texts, if at all. When I graduated college, I got a message that said, "Proud of you. No call, no dinner, no celebration." The only time I ever got their full attention was when the family business needed something. So when I finally put my phone down, smoothed my dress, and stepped out to greet guests from my fiancé's side, no one would have guessed that an hour earlier I'd been staring at proof that my entire bloodline had quietly cut me out. They thought they were free of my drama. What they didn't know was that the real drama hadn't even started yet. The ceremony passed in a blur. I remember the music starting. I remember standing at the end of the aisle, my bouquet steady in my hands, my fiancé's face softening when he saw me. I remember thinking, dimly, that I should be crying, but whatever part of me cried had gone quiet. I walked forward anyway. I said my vows clearly. I smiled when I was supposed to. I laughed at the right moments. If anyone noticed that my parents' seats were empty, no one asked. My husband's family filled the space with warmth, squeezing my hands, whispering congratulations, acting like this day mattered. And it did, just not in the way they thought. While rings were exchanged and applause rippled through the room, my mind split cleanly in two. One part of me was there, present, composed, marrying the man I loved. The other part was thousands of miles away, replaying that yacht photo like a loop I couldn't shut off. The deck, The champagne, my father's sunglasses catching the sun, that satisfied curve of his mouth. This wasn't just about absence, it was about replacement. They hadn't mourned missing my wedding. They'd filled the space with something better. By the time we reached the reception, the hurt had sharpened into something colder. The music swelled, glasses clinked. My husband pulled me into the first dance, his hand warm at my waist, grounding me just enough to keep me upright. Guests smiled, phones raised, capturing moments they thought were pure joy. Inside, I was doing inventory. Because while my family had spent years minimizing me emotionally, they had made one critical mistake. They had made themselves dependent on me. The charter company had started with my grandfather. My father liked to tell people he'd expanded it, grown it into something impressive. What he didn't mention was that he hadn't done that alone. I had. I was the one who secured contracts, the one who smoothed over client complaints before they ever reached his desk, the one who knew which captains could be trusted and which vendors would quietly extend credit if I asked. My father loved playing visionary, but the day-to-day, the logistics, the survival, that lived and died with me. And I didn't just know the operations, I knew the access points, passwords, vendor agreements, private client accounts whose loyalty wasn't to the family name, but to me. Which contracts had loopholes, which insurance policies would stall operations if flagged for review. I knew every weak spot because I was the one who made sure no one else could exploit them. While the speeches began, while my husband's brother talked about love and laughter and forever, I was doing a different kind of math. Not financial math, strategic math. How long it would take to pull my name out of the company before my father realized what was happening. How quickly I could lock things down before he could replace me. Which moves would cause inconvenience, and which would cause panic. The opportunity was almost insulting in its perfection. They had given me a public exit, a declaration, broadcast to anyone who cared to look, that they didn't want me in their lives. Fine, I could give them exactly that. Around 10:45, after the cake had been cut and the dance floor had started to thin, I leaned in and whispered to my husband that I needed a moment. He kissed my temple, told me to take my time. I slipped upstairs to the private room the venue had given us for storage. Inside my bag was my laptop. I sat down, opened it, and logged in. My hands were steady. The screen glowed softly in the dim room, the low hum of the laptop fan the only sound that mattered. I didn't hesitate. The first thing I did was transfer my shares out of the family trust. No meeting, no warning, no dramatic goodbye. Just a few clicks, a confirmation code, and years of assumed loyalty quietly erased. The second thing made me smile. I froze every corporate credit card tied to the business. Not canceled, frozen. That distinction mattered. By morning, the bank's fraud department would be calling my father, asking him to explain a string of irregular activity they couldn't ignore. He wouldn't have an explanation. Then I moved on to the vendors. Our largest fuel supplier. Locked. Our primary maintenance contractor. Locked. Without those two, the fleet wouldn't move for long. Boats don't run on optimism. I flagged 3 of our highest value client accounts for compliance review, not enough to accuse, just enough to stall. Paperwork would pile up. Payments would freeze. Operations would grind down while someone in a windowless office took their time verifying details. I removed my credentials from the master access list. That was important. Even if my father figured out what I'd done within the hour, reversing it would take days, maybe longer. Bureaucracy has a way of protecting the people who know how to use it. Finally, I opened a blank document and wrote my resignation. 2 sentences. No emotion. No explanation. Just a statement that I was leaving effective immediately, and that all future inquiries regarding operations should be directed elsewhere. I attached it, sent it, and closed the system. By midnight, the company was technically still alive, but paralyzed. Phones could ring. Emails could stack up. Nothing meaningful would move forward without me. I shut the laptop and placed it back in my bag. Then I stood, smoothed my dress, and went downstairs. No one noticed a thing. I laughed when someone told a joke. I danced when the music shifted to something upbeat. I clinked glasses with friends who told me how radiant I looked, how lucky I was. To them, I was just a bride riding the high of the best day of her life. In my head, I was already picturing my father's face when the calls started coming. I imagined the confusion first, then irritation, then the slow, sick realization that something was very wrong. I slept well that night. The morning after the wedding, I woke before my husband. The hotel room was quiet, the city outside still half asleep. I slipped out of bed, pulled on a sweater, and went down to the breakfast buffet. I hadn't even finished pouring my coffee when my phone lit up. The office landline. I let it ring. Then my father's assistant. Someone who usually only called when she needed me to fix something fast. I let that ring too. Then the senior captain. The one who'd been with the company since my grandfather ran it. 3 calls in a row. Ignored. By the time I was halfway through an omelet, the calls had turned into emails. Urgent. Accounts frozen. Vendor threatening to pull contract. Need your access codes ASAP. The words were polite, but panic bled through every line. I didn't open them. I finished my coffee, cleared my plate, and went back upstairs like nothing had happened. By day 2, my father finally reached out directly. No congratulations, no small talk. Just 4 words. What did you do? I didn't answer. Not because I was trying to punish him, but because there was nothing left to say. By day 3, the chaos spilled beyond the business. Old colleagues, family friends, even a distant cousin messaged me, saying my father had been calling everyone he could think of. One guy told me he'd seen my dad at the marina, pacing the dock while yelling into his phone at a bank representative. Apparently, he'd gone on so long and so loudly that security asked him to leave. By day 4, I blocked half the numbers in my contact list. Day 5 brought a text from my Uncle Rob, the same uncle who had posted the yacht photo. This is getting out of hand. Call him. I didn't reply. Day 6 passed in total silence. That was worse, because my father wasn't the type to walk away. And on day 7, just after sunset, the pressure finally broke. The pounding started just after sunset. Not the polite kind. Not the uncertain knock of someone hoping they were welcome. This was sharp and relentless. The sound of a person who had already decided the door would open one way or another. I didn't rush. I finished the sip of coffee I was holding, set the mug down carefully, and walked to the door at my own pace. When I opened it, I already knew who I would see. My father stood in the hallway, hair disheveled, face flushed, eyes too bright with the kind of anger that comes from being cornered. He was breathing hard, like he'd rushed straight from one crisis to the next without stopping to think. The shouting started immediately. He accused me of betrayal, of sabotage, of humiliating him. He lectured me about family, about loyalty, about everything he believed I owed him, simply because he was my father. His voice echoed down the corridor, loud enough that I noticed doors across the hall crack open, curious neighbors pretending not to listen. I didn't interrupt him. I waited. When he finally ran out of breath, I took another slow sip of my coffee and said, "Perfect timing." I didn't invite him in. I didn't close the door either. The space between us was narrow, just wide enough for him to make a choice. Step inside or walk away. I already knew which option I preferred. He pushed past me without hesitation. Once inside, he scanned my living room like he was searching for leverage, for something he could point at and use against me. His tone dropped, sharper now, controlled, but edged like glass. The marina was calling nonstop. The bank had frozen accounts. Vendors were threatening lawsuits. Clients were walking away. Did I understand what I'd done? I leaned back against the counter. Sounds like a busy week? It threw him off for half a second. He wasn't used to this version of me. I'd spent years explaining, fixing, apologizing, bridging gaps he created, and pretending it was my job. This time I gave him nothing. He shifted to threats. Undo it tonight, or lawyers would be involved by morning. I almost laughed. "Dad," I said calmly, "you don't have lawyers. You have Dennis. Dennis handles speeding tickets. He once won a fender bender because the other guy didn't show up." His mouth tightened. I reached into the cabinet and pulled out a black binder, heavier than it looked. When I set it on the table, the sound was solid, final. "This," I said, sliding it toward him, "is everything. Missing signatures, unexplained withdrawals, fake invoices, ignored safety reports. Enough to sink him twice over. If you want lawyers," I continued, "I'll make sure they get the full package. Maybe the IRS too, or the insurance carrier, or your biggest client, the one who's been financing your little vacations without knowing it." The room went silent. For a moment, he wasn't my father. He was just a man doing quick calculations, trying to figure out the cheapest way out of a trap he hadn't seen coming. Finally, his shoulders sagged. "You're still my daughter," he said quietly. "You'll come back. You always do." I shook my head. "Not this time." That's when he reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope, sliding it across the table. Inside was a check with my name on it. The number wasn't just generous, it was deliberate. Big enough to erase memories. Big enough to buy silence. "You walk away," he said, "and this stays between us." I stared at the check longer than necessary, not because I wanted it, but because I wanted him to think I might. Then I pushed the binder back toward him. The leverage he thought he had was gone. I didn't need his money, I didn't need his business, and I definitely didn't need his name. For the first time, I saw fear settle into his eyes. 2 days after my father left my condo, the smear campaign began. He told anyone who would listen that I had sabotaged the company out of spite, that I was unstable, emotional, vindictive. He framed it as a family dispute gone wrong, hoping sympathy would do what intimidation no longer could. It didn't work. His version of events drew the wrong kind of attention. Within 3 days, one of our largest clients pulled out quietly, citing risk concerns. A week later, an investigative piece surfaced online. Nothing flashy, just a careful breakdown of safety violations that had been ignored for years. Shortly after that, the IRS opened a formal inquiry. The dominoes fell faster than even I expected. The fleet was grounded. Contracts collapsed. The family name, once a selling point, became toxic. I sent one final email severing all remaining ties, deleted every corporate account tied to my name, and booked a one-way ticket somewhere warm. Standing on my balcony that last night, city lights flickering below, I realized something important. I wasn't leaving because I'd won. I was leaving because I was finally free. 6 months later, my life looked nothing like it used to. There were no urgent calls, no crises disguised as favors, no constant pressure to fix things that should never have been my responsibility. I worked with small charters now, simple operations, honest money. I drank coffee on my balcony in the mornings and listened to the sea instead of voicemail notifications. Peace was quieter than I'd imagined. One afternoon, sitting at a harbor cafe, I felt a presence before I saw it. My father stood across from me. He looked smaller, paler, worn down in a way that had nothing to do with age and everything to do with consequence. The authority he used to wear so easily was gone. "I lost everything," he said. I nodded. "I know." He searched my face, waiting for sympathy, for regret, for something he could use. "I thought we could fix it," he said finally. "You burned every bridge," I replied evenly, then built a yacht and sailed away from the ashes. He didn't argue. He just stared out at the water for a long moment before turning and disappearing into the crowd, never looking back. I felt no triumph, no anger, just certainty. 2 weeks later, an unmarked envelope arrived. Inside was an address and 4 words written in familiar handwriting. "You'll want to see." It was from Jenna, my father's former assistant, his ex-girlfriend, the one person who'd seen everything from the inside and finally decided she was done protecting him. The address led me to an abandoned boat storage warehouse on the edge of town. Inside, 2 old yachts sat rotting, forgotten. Against the far wall, stacked waist-high, were boxes. Ledgers, trips billed as client expenses, cash withdrawals tied to fake repairs, wire transfers routed through offshore accounts. All signed, all deliberate, all damning. Jenna hadn't sent me closure. She'd sent me a weapon. Standing there in the damp silence, the smell of mold thick in the air, I understood the choice in front of me. I could walk away and let it all rot, or I could pull the trigger and end whatever scraps of power my father still had left. For the first time in my life, the decision was entirely mine. And no matter what I chose next, one thing was already true. I was free.